Hello, senior scholars. Tom Mandeville here, and here's the first lecture I'm going to deliver to you on the Revolutionary War in the North Country. After looking over the material, I decided this very first class that we're going to have this coming Thursday, we're going to focus on a time period between May 10th, 1775, and January 24th, 1776. A lot of things happen in that time period, and that should keep us busy studying and discussing that sort of thing on Thursday. So, as mentioned, I believe, towards the end of last class, after the so-called shot around the world in Lexington and Concord in April of 75, it became very apparent to the Continental Army that was forming and will be put under the command of General George Washington in May by the Second Continental Congress that they were going to need some cannon and heavy guns to defend Boston now that this conflict had started. So, that's what's really going to lead, as I mentioned before, the Revolutionary War into the Champlain Valley. And on May 10th, 1775, Colonel Benedict Arnold and Ethan Allen will capture Fort Ticonderoga. Now, I'm also going to attach to this email a chronology of this particular time period that we're studying between May 10th, 1775 and January 24th, 1776, so you'll be able to more easily follow along. Plus, I'll have other links and so forth that I'll add to the email that I'll be sending out tomorrow. So, before we talk about this capture of Fort Ticonderoga, let's just talk a little bit about background information concerning Ethan Allen and Benedict Arnold. So we become more familiar with who these two gentlemen and Revolutionary War heroes are. First of all, Ethan Allen was born on January 21st, 1738 in Litchfield, Connecticut. His family moved shortly after that out into a frontier area that developed ultimately into Cornwall, Connecticut. That's where Ethan Allen grew up. In his younger life, he was studying under a minister with aspirations to go to Yale University. But unfortunately, his father passed away, which stopped any opportunity of Allen attending Yale. So he then, shortly thereafter, joined the Army. And he was in the Army for a short stint during the French and Indian War. And then, shortly after, he was married to a woman by the name of Mary Brownson. And he went into business with her brother Herman Brownson, who owned an iron furnace in Salisbury, which becomes Vermont. Because you have to remember, back in this day and age, during the Revolutionary War, Vermont was disputed territory. Both New York and New Hampshire claimed that Vermont was part of their states, and both were issuing land grants in Vermont, and it was commonly known as the Hampshire Grants. That's what the Green Mountain Boys are going to evolve out of. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Now, so there is no such thing as Vermont yet, but this is where the iron furnace that Herman and Ethan Allen operate. Very quickly, Allen decides it's too far to be going back and forth between Cornwall and Salisbury, so he relocates his family there. Now, this is when Ethan Allen's going to start to have his first brushes with the law because, as we'll find out, the Green Mountain Boys were sort of, I know Vermonters don't like to think of them this way, but they were more or less armed thugs. They used to settle land disputes in what will become Vermont between people who were issued grants by either the state of New Hampshire or the state of New York, because sometimes they'd be issued for the same piece of land to two different people. So if you had one of those disputes, you'd hire Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys, and they'd come in and settle the dispute by force, obviously favoring the person that hired them. Now, when I was reading about Allen and his first brushes with the law, it's kind of comical, especially when you think about what's going on today. His first brush with the law was there was a neighbor who had a pig who used to keep coming onto Allen's land and rooting around in his garden and so forth and destroying, his vegetable garden. Finally, he got upset, killed the pig, had it for dinner, and the pig's owner took him to court, and the court ruled that Arnold had to pay the owner to replace the pig. Kind of a comical scene when you think about what Allen does later in his life. The other thing that landed him in court was Ethan Allen gave himself a homemade vaccine for smallpox, which was, kind of commonplace back in this age. Where somebody would take a needle from a person who was infected with smallpox, touch it to one of their open sores, and then poke themselves to intentionally, hopefully, give themselves a non-fatal dose of smallpox. If successful, you develop an immunity to it. That's what Allen did. And in the town that he resided in, that was illegal. So he was taken to court when they found out that he had self-vaccinated, and he was fined for doing it, which he protested to tremendously, arguing that it was individual freedom on whether or not a person, had a self-vaccine for the smallpox, but the local government begged to differ with Allen. So that's a short history of Ethan Allen leading up to when he was part of the leader of the Green Mountain Boys and ultimately led them into the capture of Fort Ticonderoga on May 10th, 1775. So let me tell you a little bit about Benedict Arnold's life before May 10th of 75. Arnold was also born in Connecticut, born in Norwich, Connecticut, to a very successful family. His father, unfortunately, it seems to be, from what I've read, was an alcoholic and sort of drank his family into ruin. While his father was still alive and his family was able to pay for it, he attended school in Canterbury until his family became displaced when his mother passed away in 1759, and his father then died 2 years later in 1761. Now, at age 16, the year before his mother passed, he volunteered for the Connecticut militia and served in the French and Indian War in upstate New York. After his service in the French and Indian War, he served as an apprentice to one of his cousins who owned an apothecary business, and he fulfilled his apprenticeship. In 1762, he received a loan and started his own apothecary business in New Haven, Connecticut. He became a very successful businessman expanding his scope from the apothecary business, first by selling books and jewelry and pieces of art out of the same store. Then he started sailing his own ships down to the West Indies and up to Canada, trading horses and other items between the West Indies and Montreal and Quebec City. During this time period, he got his first taste for revolution because he joined the Sons of Liberty because he had been participating in smuggling to avoid paying taxes to the British. Around the time of the Boston Tea Party in 1773, he formed a militia of 58 men in his hometown of New Haven, Connecticut, which he called the Governor's Foot Guards. So that's his first taste of a revolutionary sort of force. He was elected captain of the Connecticut militia in December of 1774, and by the time that the news of Lexington and Concord, which we've talked about in passing, reached New Haven, Connecticut, he led a group of volunteers and marched to Cambridge, Massachusetts. Now, on this trip to Cambridge, he had run across some other rebels who already were talking about a plan to seize control of Fort Ticonderoga and the very valuable cannon that existed there. So, 10 days after he arrived in Cambridge, he was petitioned by the Massachusetts Committee of Safety to lead an expedition to Fort Ticonderoga to capture the cannon there and at Crown Point. So, in early May, Arnold and 50 volunteers from Massachusetts and some from Connecticut that had come with him headed to the Champlain Valley with orders from the Connecticut and the Provincial Congress of Massachusetts to seize Fort Ticonderoga, which leads us to May 10th, 1775. Arnold arrived in the Champlain Valley on the 8th. Much to his chagrin, he had discovered that Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys had already decided that Fort Ticonderoga was a very good target for capture. Arnold tried to take command of the Green Mountain Boys, but they'd have nothing to do with that. They were loyal to Ethan Allen. So the two of them, Benedict Arnold being a colonel by this point, and Ethan Allen commanded 81 of the Green Mountain Boys and a few of the Massachusetts and Connecticut volunteers. And they, on the early morning hours of May 10th, crossed the lake from the present-day Vermont side over at Hans Cove, which you can visit today, and paddled across to Fort Ticonderoga. They caught the very small detachment of British troops. Now, one thing you need to remember about the British perspective in all this, the fighting, and it hadn't even really turned into a revolution yet, had taken place on April 18th, and they didn't think that Fort Ticonderoga or Crown Point would be in any danger from anybody. And before that, since the end of the French and Indian War, where they captured both of these fortresses from the French, they had basically dwindled down forces there because there was no one to really defend them from, except for perhaps some hostile Native Americans. So, at the time of Arnold and Allen's attack on Fort Ticonderoga, it was manned under the command of Captain William Delaplace and 47 men. And basically, they didn't even really have a night sentry on duty. Arnold and Allen approached the fort, knocked on the door, much to the surprise of Captain Delaplace. They told him they were there on behalf of the Continental Army to capture the fort, and basically he surrendered immediately because at that point his men were outnumbered 2-1, and they were all still asleep in their barracks. So it wasn't much of a battle to speak of. There's some controversy over what Ethan Allen actually said in the name of great Jehovah or whatever. Nobody really knows what he said, except for surrender the fort, we're taking it. So, on May 10th, very quickly, Fort Ticonderoga falls to rebel hands. And then, 2 days later, a group of the Green Mountain Boys, led by one of my personal heroes, Seth Warner, will capture His Majesty's fort at Crown Point, which was even lighter defended than Fort Ticonderoga was. So the capture of these two fortresses, but more importantly, the 200 cannon that were there, was not much of a battle. But talk about a gigantic victory for the brand new rebel army. It was tremendous because now they've got their hands on heavy artillery that they're so desperately in need of to defend Boston and other areas. So this is a key early moment in the Revolution, and two very quick victories. Victories are going to be hard to come by for a while after the two quick victories in May of 75 right here in our backyard in the Champlain Valley. Now, what will happen in the meantime in the month of May, after the capture of Ty and Crown Point, Arnold will lead an expedition down to Skenesboro, which we mentioned in passing last class, because Jim had to study Philip Skene, the loyalist and businessman. Skenesboro, which we indicated last time, is Whitehall, New York today, quickly fell into the hands of the American rebels, led by Allen and Arnold. They seized the big prize that they initially seized from Philip Skene was his schooner, the Catherine. And it's the first vessel to be captured in the war by the colonists. And Arnold will take the schooner Catherine, which he renames the Liberty, and he'll sail north up to Saint Jean, Quebec, where the British have a fort on the Richelieu River. In a surprise attack, Arnold will capture a ship that's at Saint Jean. Excuse me. That is a British ship, not just a loyalist ship like Philip Skene's was. The King's sloop Betsy was captured by Arnold, and Arnold will take that back down to Fort Ty and Crown Point with him and rename that sloop the Enterprise. Now, you're going to want to keep that in mind because both the Liberty and the Enterprise were two of the ships that were in Arnold's fleet in October of 76 at the Battle of Elcourt. So two of the fleet, one was captured in Skenesboro, the other one up in Saint Jean, Quebec. We'll talk about a couple other ships captured by General Montgomery up at the fort at Saint Jean later. So, if you're following along with your chronology of events here, that brings us to August of 1775. Between May and August, General Washington being prodded along by now General Benedict Arnold, who had been given a promotion thanks to his heroics in the Champlain Valley, that Canada was ripe for invasion. And the thought among Washington and Arnold and others was that Canada, which had been captured as a result of the French and Indian War, would be easy pickings because most of the residents of Quebec, which we're mainly talking about here when we're talking about Canada, there was Upper and Lower Canada back in this day and age, and Lower Canada was Quebec, Upper Canada is what becomes Ontario. So we're talking about Lower Canada or Quebec. The thought was the overwhelming majority of the residents of Quebec were French, left over from the days when they were a French colony, and they remained there after the French surrendered all of Canada to Great Britain after the French and Indian War. And the thought was, these people really don't want to be under British rule. They hate the British. The French and the British had been fighting off and on for about 100 years right here in North America. And the thought was, the minute that some rebels who hated the British showed up, the French Canadians would all join in and help them defeat their British oppressors and be instantaneous allies of the rebellion. Well, all that sounds good on paper, but as we'll find out, it certainly didn't work out that way. So, Arnold had been lobbying with the new commander of the Continental Army, made so in May of 75 by the Continental Congress, George Washington, to be given command of an invasionary force that would leave the Champlain Valley and invade Quebec. He was overlooked for this command because there were two older generals who outranked him, who were ultimately given command. Originally, General Philip Schuyler was given command of all the northern armies by George Washington. Directly under his command was a very seasoned veteran, General Richard Montgomery. So, as you can see on your timeline, on August 25th, 1775, Generals Schuyler and Montgomery, with 1,200 recruits, will leave Crown Point to invade Canada. They will use the Liberty and Enterprise as part of their invasion of Canada. Now, on September 4th, General Schuyler will fall ill, and that's when command of this invasionary force will be given totally to General Richard Montgomery. Now, in the meantime, Arnold, already with his nose out of place, and as we'll find out, Arnold gets a lot of bad breaks and is overlooked for this command or this promotion throughout his service to the Continental Army. He is still continuing to lobby General Washington to be part of this plot, which he believes was his brainchild. So, what's going to happen is General Arnold, with about 1,100 men, including Captain Daniel Morgan and his riflemen, will set sail from Newburyport, Massachusetts, with their destination north, the mouth of the Kennebec River in Maine. And this will make this attack on, the target is Quebec City, but typically back in this day and age when you're reading about this, they'll just refer to Quebec City as Quebec because there was no such thing as the province of Quebec yet. As I mentioned before, it was Lower Canada. So, Arnold and Morgan and 1,100 men sailed from Newburyport, Massachusetts on September 19th, 1775, and they will then start their horrible trek on the Kennebunk River as far north as they can go, and then march through the woods and wilderness to rendezvous with General Montgomery on the Plains of Abraham at what is now Quebec City. So that's where we're going to end this first lecture, because about 25 minutes I've found is all anyone can pay attention to me, and you get sick of listening to me. So I'm going to take a small break, get a drink of water, because I'm getting hoarse here, probably because it's so damn cold out today. And then we'll resume with what happens on September 25th, 1775. So let me take a little break here. I'll get a drink of water, and I'll be back with you shortly. See you soon.